Let's talk to Claire Coutinho, MP, Shadow Climate and Net Zero Secretary. She's down on College Green in Westminster for us on the moment that Keir Starmer has returned from COP29, full of the joys of spring, telling us how he's going to reduce carbon emissions by a ludicrous 81%. Claire, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I have to say, I wonder whether it was a good use of the Prime Minister's time to go to COP29 when hardly any other world leaders actually went. And it was effectively also attended by the Taliban. Not a great look, is it?
Well, this is the thing. We are 1% of global emissions, and actually the world leaders of the countries which amount to 60% of global emissions didn't go. And the thing that I worry about the most is, as you say, he's signed us up to a new target, but he hasn't told anyone what that means. And actually, I worry it means real hardship for the British people. If you look at some of the things that the Climate Change Committee was suggesting when they talked about this carbon budget and having higher targets, it could be shifting diet away from meat and dairy, less travel by car and plane. I'm really worried about what Ed Miliband's going to do to people's energy bills. And actually, I don't see the point of making living standards worse here to make a point on global climate change, because the point about being a world leader is you want other people to follow your lead. You want to be an example, not a warning to the rest of the world. And actually, I think what we're seeing is, once again, no detail, no plans from the Labour Party, and actually a bunch of promises that they won't be able to keep.
Well, it's a bit of a confusing message as well coming from Labour, isn't it? Because on the way out to Baku, Keir Starmer was asked on the plane, you know, what he was doing, and people were saying he was travelling a bit too much and spending too much time away. And he said, no, our focus is very much on the economy and on immigration. Those are the two main sort of missions that we're going to be continuing with, and that's very much front and centre of our policy making. And then he turns up in Baku and starts talking about, you know, there is no international security without climate security. There's no border security without climate security. So which is it? What is his priority?
And also, what we've seen in this energy and net zero space is actually they just haven't been honest to the public time and time again. They came into the election saying we're going to save people £300 off their energy bills. They won't repeat that promise now. And actually, we gave them the chance to vote on that promise a couple of weeks ago. They whipped their Labour MPs to vote it down. They didn't tell anyone about cutting the winter fuel payment, which they've now taken away from 10 million pensioners. They said that their green plans would lead to growth. Well, guess what? After the budget, the IFS said there's no growth here. And actually, what we've seen is the actions that they're taking is they're going to enormously raise people's energy bills. And that's what I really worry about, because all you're going to do is make energy even more expensive here when it needs to be cheaper. And you're going to move industry abroad to places like China, which are still 60% powered by coal. Now, that means fewer jobs here, more carbon in the atmosphere. It's simply completely mad.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people in this country that I speak to anyway tell me that they're not really that interested in net zero. They're not really that interested in spending more money to heat their homes because they haven't got the right kind of heat pump. They're not interested in somebody coming and ripping out their gas boiler. You know, they think this kind of race to net zero is wrong. And many of them say it kind of started under your government.
Well, look, I came in last year and I was tasked with resetting this conversation, being honest about the trade-offs, making sure that we were protecting consumers and living standards. That's something I feel really passionately about, because we are 1% of global emissions, and actually ours have been falling. And in the rest of the world, where 99% of emissions are happening, they're rising. So, for example, since 1990, we've cut our emissions by 50%. China's are up by 300%. And what are the Labour Party going to do? They're going to reward them by moving our industry abroad and making us much more reliant on Chinese imports, which are going to be fueled by coal. That simply makes no sense when it comes to climate change. It makes no sense for the economy. And it's, you know, like I said, it makes no sense for living standards here in Britain, which is a thing that I really care about.
Right. But what I'm saying, I suppose, is that would it not be a better idea for the Conservatives now under Kemi Badenoch to sort of provide a slightly different view on net zero, rather than saying, well, we kind of agree with them, we just don't think they're doing it right?
Well, I think if you've listened to what I've said today, I'm providing a different view, which is that we should focus less on our domestic emissions, which are 1%, and more on the 99%. I actually think there are really interesting things that the country can do. We're an amazing innovator, and actually we could produce and manufacture things here, like small modular reactors, for example, the next generation of nuclear, and we could export that to the rest of the world. And that would mean more jobs here and less carbon emissions abroad. I think that would be a good thing overall. But what we're seeing from Keir Starmer has a very different tack. Like I said, he's just announced a big new target with no detail on what that means, and it probably means more hardship for people who don't want to see higher energy bills. They want to see cheaper energy in this country, and that is completely the wrong thing to do when it comes to both climate change and the economy.
Well, he says he wants to reduce it by 81% to net zero by 2035. What is your target for net zero then? Because according to your title, I mean, you are net zero secretary, so I presume you still want to reach net zero, do you?
Well, like I said, I think we should look at all of these things and have a greater focus on that 99%. So I'm not going to stand here now and come up with numbers about what I think the target should be, because I think we need to have a proper look at all of this and make sure that we're doing this in a rational way. And some of the things that I was doing when I was in post was arguing, for example, for more gas power plants, more nuclear, the largest expansion of nuclear that we'd seen in this country for 30 years, because my sole focus is making sure that we've got cheap energy, that we're thinking about all of these things in a rational way, that we're not creating more hardship for the British people, and actually we are looking at what we can do in terms of exporting and innovating the very best technologies. I mentioned small modular reactors. I could talk about fusion energy or space solar and all these other things that we could create in this country, create great jobs and export abroad. That's what I would like to see.
OK. Let me ask you one final question about Alison Pearson. I don't know if you've seen the Telegraph today, Claire, but Alison Pearson, Daily Telegraph writer, columnist, has written her own column this morning, but also is the subject of the front page story. She was visited by two police officers on Remembrance Sunday who were investigating a hate crime inquiry, apparently. She's called it Kafkaesque. She's a journalist. She's sent out a tweet something like a year ago. They won't tell her what the tweet is, but they did tell her that there was a complaint about it and that they were having to investigate a non-crime hate incident. I thought this was all something that had been done away with by the Tory government.
So I haven't seen the details of that, but I think I really worry that we're going to have a chilling effect on free speech if we have people turning up saying we don't like your tweets, and it sounds like they're not even telling her which ones they disagree with. And I think it's really important that we have free speech in this country. I was the Minister for Free Speech. I brought in the Higher Education Free Speech Act, which Labour have now seemed to have kiboshed. And I think that's a really important part of democracy and an important part of society as well. So I haven't seen the details of that case, but it certainly sounds worrying to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's worrying for all of us. Claire, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Claire Coutinho, Climate and Net Zero Secretary, live from College Green down there in Westminster.